The emergency broadcast cut through every communication channel in the known galaxy. Ra's hands shook as she stood before the camera, her pale blue skin streaked with tears. Behind her, through the observation window, fires burned across the capital city of Prime. "Please," she said, her voice breaking, "anyone who can hear this, we are dying." She pressed a button and footage filled the screens across 70 star systems. Children running from burning schools, cities crumbling under the assault of massive creatures, ships falling from the sky like broken toys. The swarm had come to her world and they were losing. There were artists and thinkers. For 3,000 years they had given the galaxy beautiful music, stunning art, and deep philosophy. Their ships explored peacefully. Their weapons were ceremonial, meant for parades and celebrations, not real war. They had never needed to fight before. Now they were paying the price. "Our outer colonies are gone," Ra continued. 15 billion dead in the first week. The swarm is not just killing us. They are taking our children, using them as hosts for their young. Please, we cannot stop them alone. She showed more footage. Swarm warriors, each one 9 feet tall with bladed limbs and dripping mandibles, dragging civilians into massive organic ships. Universities that had stood for reduced to ash. Gardens that had been tended for generations trampled into mud. "We have 42 days," she said quietly. "Our defense fleet is gone. Our planetary shields are failing. In 42 days the swarm will reach our. After that the people will cease to exist." The message reached the Galactic Council within hours. The council chamber filled with representatives from 100 species. They gathered in their floating seats, arranged in a perfect circle, all equals under galactic law. Ra stood in the center, beneath the light that marked the speaker's position. She had prepared no speech. There was no time for pretty words. "Help us," she said simply. The ambassador spoke first. His reptilian features showed no emotion. "The Empire maintains strict neutrality in all conflicts. We cannot set a precedent." "This is not a conflict," Ra pleaded. "This is extinction. The swarm does not negotiate. It does not take prisoners. It consumes everything." The representative chimed in, their crystalline body pulsing with soft light. "We offer our thoughts and meditation. The harmony of the universe will guide you through this difficulty." "Thoughts?" Ra's voice rose. "My people need ships, weapons, soldiers, not thoughts." The deeper ambassador, speaking from their water-filled tank, rippled their tentacles in what might have been sympathy. "We regret that we cannot spare resources. Our own territories require constant protection." One by one, the excuses came. The worlds held no rare minerals worth fighting for. They produced nothing the great powers needed. They had no strategic location, no military alliances that mattered. They were simply not important enough to save. "Then what is the point of this council?" Ra shouted. "What is the point of your laws and treaties if you abandon those who need help?" Silence filled the chamber. The ambassadors looked away. Some seemed uncomfortable, others appeared bored. "We are sorry," the ambassador said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But we must consider our own people first." Ra stood there for a long moment. Then she laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Of course, I understand now. The Galactic Council helps only those who can help themselves. The strong protect the strong. The weak are meant to die." She turned off her holographic display. The images of dying children vanished. "Then we die alone," she said. "So be it. I hope you all sleep well, knowing what you have chosen today." The transmission ended. Ra returned to her ship and began the long journey home, to a world that would not exist much longer, to a people who had been abandoned by the stars. 3 days later, the message reached Earth. Admiral sat in her office in Seoul, watching the broadcast for the 3rd time. She was a small woman with hard eyes and gray hair tied back in a tight bun. She had spent 40 years in Earth's military, rising through ranks during humanity's bloodiest wars. She had seen things that would break most people. But watching children dragged into swarm ships made her hands curl into fists. She walked through the corridors of Human Defense Command without saying a word. Officers stepped aside as she passed. They knew that look. They had learned to recognize when Admiral was angry. She entered General Menu's office without knocking. He looked up from his desk, saw her face, and immediately understood. "The message," he said. "Yes." Menu was older than, a broad-shouldered man with scars on his face and hands that never quite stopped shaking from his time in the war. He had led Marines through hell itself. He had made decisions that haunted his dreams, but he had never abandoned anyone who needed help. "What does the Council say?" he asked. "Nothing, they are not helping, they are alone." Menu pulled up the tactical data on his screen. Numbers scrolled past. Distances, fleet positions, supply lines. There was 18 days away at maximum speed. The swarm would reach it in 42 days. "We have no treaty with them," Menu said, reading the diplomatic files. "No trade agreements, no mutual defense pact. The Council has advised all species not to interfere." "I know. If we go without support, without backup. The Council might even sanction us for it." "I know that too." Menu looked at the screen again, at the footage of burning cities and dying children, at a civilization that had created beauty for thousands of years, now being erased from existence. He closed the files and stood up. "How many ships can we mobilize?" he asked. Allowed herself a small smile. "Every carrier we have, every gunship, every Marine who can hold a rifle. That is a lot of resources for people we have never met." "Yes." "The government will ask questions. They will want to know why we are risking human lives for strangers." "Let them ask." Menu nodded slowly. He walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Seoul had been destroyed 3 times in humanity's wars. Each time it had been rebuilt, because humans did not give up. They did not abandon hope, and they did not let the innocent die if they could prevent it. "Send the order," he said quietly. "Mobilize the fleet, every ship, every soldier. We leave in 12 hours. "The Council." "I do not care about the Council," Menu said, turning to face her. His voice was hard as iron. "They had their chance to do the right thing. They chose politics over lives. We will not." Saluted and left to give the orders. Within minutes, alarms rang throughout Earth's military bases. Ships began fueling. Marines grabbed their gear. Pilots ran to their fighters. The orders were simple: save at any cost. In his office, Menu looked at the star map one more time. The swarm was vast and powerful. Earth was young and small by galactic standards. By all logic, this was a fight humanity could not win. But logic had never stopped humans before. "Hold on," he whispered to the distant stars where they waited to die. "We are coming." The stars bent and twisted as the Earth fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 23 carriers emerged first, their hulls painted with the blue and white of the United Earth government. Behind them came 400 gunships, each one bristling with weapons. 60,000 Marines waited in the troop bays, checking their rifles and saying quiet prayers. They arrived at the edge of territory exactly 18 days after leaving Earth. They had pushed their engines to the breaking point. Some ships had burned out completely and had to be towed the last 2 days, but they had made it. On the bridge of the carrier Seoul's Pride, Admiral studied the tactical display. The swarm had detected them immediately. Now the enemy was responding. "Sensors show 10,000 swarm bioships incoming," her tactical officer reported. "Standard consumption wave formation." Nodded. She had studied every report on the swarm available. They were predictable in their tactics: overwhelming numbers, close combat, terror and consumption. It had worked against 40 different species. "All ships battle formation Delta," she ordered. "Marines to assault pods. We board them before they board us. The swarm bioships looked like massive insects made of bone and flesh. They had no engines humans could recognize, moving through space with organic thrusters that spewed biomatter. They had no shields, just thick armor made of chitin and compressed tissue, and they carried thousands of warriors each. The first wave hit the Earth fleet like a tsunami. Lieutenant gripped the handles in his assault pod as it launched from Sol's Pride. Around him, 9 other Marines sat in their crash seats, faces hidden behind helmets. They had trained for this, boarding actions in hostile environments, close quarters combat, fighting enemies that wanted to eat them. 30 seconds to impact, the pod's computer announced. Checked his plasma rifle one last time. Next to him, Corporal was sharpening her combat knife. On his other side, Private was praying softly in Korean. The pod hit the swarm bioship like a meteor. Cutting lasers burned through the organic hull. The door blew open. Went through first, rifle up, scanning the corridor. The interior of the bioship was wet and warm, like being inside a living creature, because that is what it was. The walls pulsed. Strange lights glowed from veins running along the ceiling. Move forward, ordered. Stay tight, watch your corners. They advanced through the corridor in formation, just like clearing buildings back in Seoul during training. Except the buildings did not breathe, and the walls did not bleed when you shot them. The first swarm warrior came around the corner fast. It was massive 9 feet of chitinous armor and bladed limbs. Its mandibles clicked as it saw the humans. It had killed hundreds of aliens this way. Easy prey, soft bodies, weak minds. Put 3 plasma bolts through its head. The warrior collapsed, twitching. The Marine stepped over it and kept moving. More warriors came. The corridor filled with the sound of gunfire and screaming. Swarm warriors moved fast, but human rifles moved faster. When the warriors got close, the Marines switched to combat knives, stabbing through gaps in the armor. Private Jinnah got separated from the main group when a bulkhead collapsed. She found herself alone in a side chamber, facing 3 swarm warriors. They circled her, clicking and hissing. They had her trapped. Jinnah looked at them and smiled behind her helmet. She reached down and pulled a device from her belt. A dead man's switch connected to 40 pounds of high explosive strapped to her body. "Come on then," she said in Korean, though they could not understand her. "Let's dance." The warriors hesitated. They had never seen prey act this way. Their instincts said run. Jinnah charged forward, knife in one hand, detonator in the other. The explosion took out half the deck. Meanwhile, in orbit, Captain commanded the carrier's hammer. The swarm had noticed that human ships were harder to crack than expected, so they changed tactics. Bioships latched onto the hammer's hull and began cutting through. "Boarders incoming," the security chief reported. "Multiple breach points." Looked at the display. The swarm was pouring into his ship through 6 different holes. They expected to overwhelm the crew through sheer numbers. It had worked 1,000 times before. "Seal sections 7 through 12, ordered calmly. "Vent atmosphere in the compromised corridors." "Sir, we have crew in those sections." "They know the drill. They are already in pressure suits. Do it." The ship's computer obeyed. Airlock slammed shut. Atmosphere vented into space. The swarm warriors found themselves suddenly in vacuum. Some survived, the tough ones, the smart ones. Then released the dogs. The security detail consisted of 40 augmented war dogs, each one weighing 200 pounds and wearing powered armor. They had been bred and trained for one purpose: hunting in zero gravity. Their armor had magnetic grips and small thrusters. Their jaws could bite through steel. The dogs launched into the sealed corridors like furry missiles. What followed was not a fight. It was a hunt. The swarm warriors were ambush predators, used to cornering prey. They had never been prey themselves. The dogs tore through them with savage efficiency, using the zero gravity to bounce off walls and attack from impossible angles. In the sealed observation room, watched the security feeds. He felt no joy in it. War was never joyful, but he felt satisfaction. The swarm had come to his ship expecting easy victims. They found beasts instead. On the planet below, civilians watched the orbital battle through telescopes and sensor arrays. They had spent weeks in shelters, waiting to die. The swarm had been days away from landing. Extinction had been certain. Now impossible lights filled their sky. Explosions, weapon fire, ships burning. But not swarm ships. Ra stood in the capital's command center, watching the tactical display with tears streaming down her face. The human fleet was winning. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that had destroyed 40 species, these strange aliens from a world called Earth were winning. How, she whispered, how are they doing this? Her military advisor, an old name, shook his head. They fight like nothing I have ever seen. No retreat, no surrender. When their weapons run out, they use knives. When their ships are damaged, they ram the enemy. They fight as if death means nothing to them. A human frigate appeared on the display. The heavily damaged, engines failing, hull breached in a dozen places. It should have retreated to the repair ships. Instead, it turned toward the largest swarm hive ship in the sector. What is it doing? Ra asked. They watched as the accelerated, maximum thrust, headed straight for the hive ship's core. Commander sat alone on the bridge of the. Her crew had evacuated 10 minutes ago, just her now. Her and a ship that had served faithfully for 15 years. She looked at the hive ship growing larger in the. She thought about the children she had seen in the broadcasts, the ones dragged away screaming, the ones who would never grow up, never laugh, never see another sunrise. This is for them, she said quietly. She increased speed, 0.2 light speed, 0.3. The hive ship tried to turn, too slow, too late. Commander closed her eyes. The struck at 0.3 light speed. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface, a new star burning briefly in the sky. The hive ship broke apart, torn into pieces, 12,000 swarm warriors dead in an instant. On Sol's Pride, Admiral watched the explosion fade. She made a note in her log. Commander killed in action, recommended for the highest honors. Then she returned her attention to the battle. There were still 9,000 swarm ships left to kill. All ships, she broadcast, for Earth, for everyone who cannot fight for themselves, show them what humans do. The fleet responded with fire and fury. Gunships dove into swarm formations. Marines boarded every bioship they could reach. The carrier groups formed a wall between the swarm and the planet. The swarm had expected an easy victory. They had faced young species before, weak ones, scared ones. They had never faced humans. And now, in the darkness of space, with fires burning all around, the swarm began to learn what humans really were. Not victims, not prey. Beasts. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when the first human shuttles began landing on Prime. Not military shuttles, medical ships, supply transports, relief convoys. Ra stood at the main spaceport watching them arrive. The port had been bombed 2 days before. Craters marked the landing pads. Burned buildings surrounded the area. Smoke still rose from the ruins. But the humans landed anyway, their shuttles setting down carefully between the debris. Ramps lowered and humans emerged wearing white armor with red crosses on their shoulders. "We are here to help," the lead medic said in badly accented. "Where are your wounded?" Ra could only point. The entire city was wounded. The human medical teams spread out quickly. They set up field hospitals in minutes, using equipment that folded out from compact containers. Doctors watched in amazement as humans worked with practiced efficiency, treating injuries that medicine had given up on. One human doctor, a young woman who introduced herself as nurse, worked on a child who had been caught in a building collapse. The child's arm was crushed. Doctors had said amputation was the only option. Spent 4 hours reconstructing the arm using techniques they had never seen. Microscopic sutures, bone grafts, nerve reconnection. When she finished, the child could move her fingers. "How did you learn this?" the doctor asked. Looked tired, dark circles marked her eyes. "My planet has known many wars. We have learned to fix what war breaks." Above the planet, the orbital battle continued. Admiral had pulled her fleet into a defensive sphere around Prime. Every swarm ship that tried to approach faced concentrated fire from 3 sides. But the swarm kept coming. For every bioship destroyed, 2 more appeared. They were pulling forces from across the sector, determined to finish what they had started. "We cannot hold forever," his tactical officer said quietly. "We do not need forever," replied, "just long enough." On the surface, General Minu landed with the first wave of ground forces. He stepped off the transport ramp and took a deep breath of air. It smelled like flowers and smoke. Ra met him at the spaceport entrance. She had not slept in 3 days. Her hands shook as she approached the human general. "Why?" she asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since the human fleet arrived. "We are nothing to you. We offered nothing. We have no resources you need, no strategic value. Why did you come?" Minu looked at her with eyes that had seen too many wars. "Because you asked for help." "Others asked for help. The Council ignored them too." "Then the Council is wrong." Minu gestured to his Marines who were unloading supplies. "We have a saying on Earth. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. The swarm is evil. We are not going to do nothing." "But the cost is worth it," Minu interrupted gently. "Some things you do not need a reason for. Helping people is one of them." Ra felt tears coming again. She had cried so much these past weeks. "I do not understand your species. The Council records say humans are primitive, violent, dangerous." "We are violent," Minu agreed. "Very violent, but we choose who that violence is directed at. Today it is directed at the swarm." A child ran past them, chasing a ball through the spaceport. Just a child, playing as if the world was not ending around her. A human Marine bent down and picked up the ball when it rolled to his feet. He handed it back with a smile. The child smiled back and ran off. Minu watched this small moment and nodded. "That is why we came, for her, for all of them." The word spread through the population quickly. The humans had come, not for profit, not for territory, just to help. It was a concept so foreign to galactic politics that many could not believe it at first. But the evidence was everywhere. Human Marines working alongside civilians to clear rubble. Human engineers repairing power stations. Human doctors treating the wounded without asking for payment. Human pilots dying in space to protect a world they had never seen before. A new word entered the language that day. It meant those who answer the darkness, the humans. In the orbital battle, the swarm tried new tactics. They sent smaller, faster bioships to slip through the human defensive line. Most were destroyed. A few made it through. One landed in the capital city, crashing through the roof of a shelter where 500 civilians hid. Swarm warriors poured out, ready to harvest. They made it 3 steps before human Marines hit them from both sides. Private led his squad through the shelter entrance at a full run. He saw the swarm warriors immediately. 9 of them, each one massive and armed with natural weapons that could tear through metal. "Contact," he shouted. "Civilians behind the warriors, watch your fire." The squad spread out, flanking the warriors, forcing them to turn away from the civilians. Plasma rifles barked in the enclosed space. The noise was deafening. Warriors fell but kept coming. One warrior grabbed, lifting him off the ground. Its mandibles opened, ready to bite his head off. Pulled his sidearm and emptied the entire magazine into the warrior's mouth. They fell together, crashing into the ground. When the firing stopped, all 9 warriors were dead. 3 Marines were wounded, but 500 civilians were safe. An elderly approached as medics worked on his broken ribs. "You saved us," he said simply. Winced as a medic wrapped his chest. "Just doing our job, sir. You came from across the stars. You owe us nothing. This is not just a job." Managed a smile. "On Earth, we have another saying. All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to stand by. We are not standing by." The battle raged for 3 more days. Human and swarm ships traded fire across the system. The humans were outnumbered, but they fought with a ferocity that shocked the swarm. Human gunships performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, pulling G-forces that would kill most species. Human Marines boarded bioships and fought room to room, corridor to corridor, refusing to give ground. When ammunition ran low, they used knives. When knives broke, they used their fists. The swarm had conquered 40 species. They had perfected the art of overwhelming terror, but terror did not work on humans. If anything, it made them angry. On the 4th day, reinforcements arrived, not for the humans, for the swarm. 3 more hive fleets called from neighboring sectors. The tactical display showed 200,000 swarm ships converging on space. Looked at the numbers and felt her heart sink. Her fleet had lost 30% of its strength. They were running low on ammunition. Pilots were exhausted. Marines were down to their last magazines. "Admiral," her tactical officer said quietly, "we cannot win this." Knew he was right. By every military calculation, this battle was lost. Standard doctrine said retreat. Save what forces you can. Fall back to defendable positions. But looked at the planet below. At the cities her fleet had protected for 4 days. At the children who were alive because human Marines had stood between them and the monsters. "Send a message to Earth," she said. "Tell them we need everything they have, everything they swore they would never use again." "Admiral, do it." The message went out on quantum channels, straight to Earth, to the commanders who remembered humanity's darkest days, to the generals who had locked certain weapons away and promised they would never be released. The response came back in 3 words: "Authorization granted, Godspeed." 72 hours later, the transports arrived. Black ships with no markings. They moved through space like shadows, their stealth systems making them almost invisible. They carried no regular Marines, no standard weapons. They carried the chimeras. General Minu watched the transports dock with soul's pride. He stood at the observation window as the first chimera unit emerged from their ship. They did not look entirely human anymore. 10 feet tall, muscles like cables under skin that seemed too tight, eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They moved with perfect coordination, each one aware of the others through neural links. Sergeant led the first platoon. She had been a regular Marine once, beautiful, kind, with a bright future. Then she had volunteered for the program. Let them change her, make her into something else, something designed for one purpose: killing. She saluted Minu. "Chimera 1st Platoon reporting, sir." Minu returned the salute. He felt a deep sadness looking at her, at what humanity had done to its own people in the name of survival. "You understand the mission?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Board the hive ships. Eliminate all swarm forces. Make them regret coming here. More specifically, make them stop. The swarm is a kill enough nodes they will withdraw." Smiled. It was not a human smile anymore. "With respect, sir, they will not withdraw. We are going to make them extinct." Minu wanted to object, but looking at her eyes, at the cold determination there, he knew she was right. Sometimes the only answer to monsters was to send bigger monsters. "Good hunting, Sergeant," he said quietly. "Always, sir." The chimeras boarded their assault pods and launched into the dark. The swarm processed information across 1 billion nodes. It had existed for 1 million years, consuming species after species. It had adaptation protocols for every known combat doctrine. It had counters for every weapon. It had strategies for every defense. It had never encountered anything like humans. The data confused the humans fought harder when wounded. They sacrificed themselves for strangers. They showed no fear even when facing certain death. These behaviors made no evolutionary sense. They decided to adapt. It pulled forces from 3 neighboring sectors, 200,000 bioships, 5 billion warriors, enough to consume 100 worlds, all directed at one small human fleet, protecting people the humans had never met before. They was certain this would work. Numbers always worked. Overwhelming force always won. It was about to learn differently. Sergeant felt her assault pod hit the hive ship's hull. The cutting lasers burned through organic armor. The door blew open and she launched herself into the corridor. A swarm warrior was waiting. 9 feet of killing machine, perfectly evolved for combat. It had razor limbs and armor that could stop most weapons. It had killed thousands. It lasted 4 seconds. Moved faster than anything that size should move. Her augmented muscles generated force that would shatter normal human bones. She ripped the warrior's head off with her bare hands. Behind her, her platoon spread out through the ship. They moved in perfect coordination, each chimera linked to the others through neural implants. They shared targeting data, tactical awareness, kill counts. Private encountered 3 warriors in a junction. He was smaller than only 9 feet tall, but just as deadly. His combat knife was monomolecular, able to cut through anything. The warriors tried to surround him. Wrong choice. Moved through them like water. Knife flashing, 3 strikes, 3 dead warriors. He stepped over their bodies and kept moving. No wasted motion, no hesitation. They registered the intrusion and sent more warriors. Dozens, then hundreds. It was used to overwhelming invaders with sheer numbers. The chimeras killed them all. Corporal fought in a breeding chamber, surrounded by swarm eggs and young warriors still emerging from their cocoons. Normal soldiers would have been horrified. Just started shooting. Her rifle fired explosive rounds, each one designed to kill soft targets. The chamber filled with fire and dying screams. When her rifle clicked empty, she pulled her sidearm. When that ran dry, she used her knife. When a warrior broke her knife, she used her hands. Had been a teacher once before the augmentation. She had loved children, taught them mathematics and art. Then the wars came and she volunteered to become something else, something that could protect children by destroying their enemies. She thought about children as she killed, the ones in the broadcasts, the ones being dragged into ships like this one. Not anymore, she growled, snapping a warrior's neck. They tried new tactics. It sealed corridors, vented atmosphere, released toxins. Nothing worked. The chimeras wore powered armor with independent air supplies. They cut through sealed doors. They survived in vacuum. Reached the ship's neural center, where the hive mind node controlled everything. It was a massive organic brain, pulsing with bioluminescent veins. Swarm warriors defended it desperately. She killed them all and then destroyed the brain with high explosives. The ship went dead, drifting in space. All its systems failed. Node destroyed, she reported over the neural link, moving to next target. Across the battlefield, 40 other chimera units were doing the same thing, boarding hive ships, killing everything inside, destroying neural centers. The swarm began to experience something new. Something it had not felt in a million years of existence. Fear. The human regular forces were not idle either. With the chimeras creating chaos in the swarm fleet, Admiral ordered her ships to attack. The carrier Soul's Pride led the assault. Its fighter wings launched in perfect formation. 200 small craft, each one flown by a pilot who had trained for 10,000 hours. They hit the swarm bioships like a swarm of angry hornets. Captain commanded a squadron of heavy bombers. His target was a super hive ship, larger than any other, probably carrying the sector command node. "All wings form on me," he ordered. "We go straight down their throat." The bombers dove toward the super hive ship. Point defense fire filled the space around them. Ships exploded. Pilots died. The survivors kept coming. Bomber took a hit that tore off one wing. The ship started spinning. He compensated with thrusters, fighting to maintain control. "I am hit," he reported calmly, proceeding to target. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Sara, armed the main payload. 12 fusion warheads, each one capable of destroying a city. "Target locked," she said. "Fire." The warheads streaked toward the super hive ship. Point defense destroyed half of them. The other 6 penetrated the organic hull and detonated inside. The explosion tore the ship apart from within. 12,000 warriors died instantly. The sector command node ceased to exist. Crippled bomber tumbled through the debris field. "Everyone out," he ordered his crew. "Eject now." "What about you, sir?" Sora asked. "Someone has to keep the ship steady for your pods to launch. Now go." The crew ejected, stayed in his seat, fighting the controls, keeping the bomber level long enough for his people to escape. When the last pod launched, he allowed himself to smile. "Not a bad way to go," he said to himself. The bomber exploded. Admiral marked another name in her log. "Captain killed in action, recommended for honors." She had marked so many names, too many. But still the fleet fought on. On Prime, General Minu coordinated the ground defense. The swarm had landed forces in 3 places, trying to overwhelm the defenses while the space battle raged. Human Marines and militia fought side by side. They were not warriors, but they fought anyway, for their homes, for their children, and they learned quickly from the humans. A young named X found himself in a foxhole with 2 human Marines. The swarm was advancing across the open ground. Thousands of warriors, a living wave of death. "They are too many," X said, his voice shaking. "Probably," Private agreed, checking his rifle. "But they still have to come through us to get to the city." "How can you be so calm?" Looked at him. "Because being afraid does not help. Fighting helps, so we fight." The swarm wave hit their position. The Marines opened fire. X hesitated for a moment, then started shooting too. They held the line for 6 hours. When reinforcements finally arrived, X was still alive, covered in swarm blood, out of ammunition, but alive. The human Marine next to him was dead. He had used his body to shield X from a warrior's blade. X would never forget that. A human he had known for 6 hours, dying to save him. In space, the battle reached its peak. The swarm had committed everything to this sector. The humans were running on fumes and determination. Sergeant and her chimeras had destroyed 60 hive ships. They were covered in acid burns and stab wounds. Their armor was broken, but they kept fighting. Boarded another bioship. Her left arm was broken. Her right leg had a piece of warrior chitin lodged in it. She could feel her augmented systems compensating, flooding her body with combat drugs and pain suppressors. She did not care. There were more warriors to kill. The watch threw 1,000 eyes as its forces fell. It calculated odds, ran scenarios, searched its million-year database for solutions. There were none. The humans were too aggressive, too willing to die, too effective at killing. And those augmented ones, the chimeras, they were destroying neural nodes faster than they could compensate. For the first time in its existence, the swarm made a decision based on fear rather than strategy. It ordered a retreat. The swarm ships began pulling back, not an organized withdrawal, a rout, a panic. Bioships fled in every direction, abandoning wounded vessels, leaving warriors stranded. Admiral saw it happening on her tactical display. The massive swarm fleet, 200,000 strong, running away. Pursue, she ordered. I want every ship that runs destroyed. I want the survivors to remember this day for the rest of their miserable existence. The human fleet gave chase. For 3 days they hunted fleeing swarm ships. No mercy, no prisoners. They destroyed everything they could catch. By the end, 70% of the swarm force in the sector was gone. The rest scattered to distant stars, carrying with them a new fear. The fear of humans. On the 4th day, the guns finally fell silent. The battle for Prime was over. The humans had won. The silence after battle was strange. For 3 weeks the system had been filled with the sound of war, explosions, weapons fire, ships dying. Now there was only quiet. Admiral stood on the bridge of Soul's Pride, looking at the damage reports. Her fleet had started with 23 carriers. She had 12 left. 400 gunships had become 150. 60,000 Marines had become 42,000. Too many names in her log. Too many heroes who would never see Earth again. But they were alive. That had to mean something. On the planet below, the work of rebuilding had already begun. Human engineers worked alongside construction crews, clearing rubble and repairing infrastructure. Medical teams treated the last of the wounded. Supply ships brought food and medicine. General Minu walked through the capital city streets, observing the work. Everywhere he looked, he saw humans and working together, sharing food, teaching each other words in their languages, laughing despite everything. A child ran up to him and handed him a flower, purple petals with gold edges. Minu did not know what kind it was, but he accepted it with a smile. "Thank you," he said in careful. The child beamed and ran back to her mother, who bowed deeply to Minu. He returned the bow and continued walking. Ra found him at the memorial site. They had erected a temporary monument to the fallen, names carved in stone, human and names together. "There are so many," she said quietly. "Yes. They died for us, people they never met, a world they had never seen." Minu looked at the names. Private Jinnah, who had blown herself up rather than let the swarm take her alive. Commander, who had rammed her ship into a hive vessel. Captain, who had stayed with his bomber so his crew could escape. Thousands more. "They died doing what was right," he said. "That is all any soldier can ask for." "But the cost is always high," Minu interrupted gently. "War costs. It takes the best of us and leaves the rest to remember them. But the alternative was letting your people die. That cost would have been higher." Ra touched one of the names, a Marine who had saved her life during a swarm ground assault. She had known him for only a few hours before he died. "Your species is strange," she said. "The galaxy calls you primitive, violent, dangerous, but you came when no one else would. You bled for strangers. I do not understand." Minu smiled slightly. "Humans are violent, this is true. We have fought terrible wars among ourselves, killed each other over land, resources, beliefs. We nearly destroyed our own world several times." "Then how?" "We learned," Minu said. "We learned that violence is a tool, not a purpose. We learned that strength means nothing if not used to protect the weak. We learned that the strong do not prey on the helpless, they protect them." He gestured to the memorial. "These humans died because they believed that. They believed some things are worth fighting for, worth dying for. Your children's lives, your people's future. These are worth any cost." High above the planet, in the cold of space, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The chamber filled with representatives from 100 species. They gathered in their floating seats, the same seats where they had refused to help Now they demanded explanations. "The humans deployed weapons of mass destruction," the ambassador shouted. "Fusion warheads, biological augmentation. These violate council regulations. They interfered in a conflict without authorization," they added. "This sets a dangerous precedent." "They must be sanctioned," the deeper representative agreed. Their fleet must be limited, their weapons restricted. The arguments went on for an hour. Species that had done nothing to help the now spoke about laws and regulations, about proper procedures, about the importance of council approval. Then General Menu's hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. He had not asked permission to speak. He simply appeared. "You want to talk about regulations?" His voice was quiet, but it cut through the chamber like a knife. "You want to discuss proper procedures?" The chamber fell silent. "They screamed for help for 16 days, Menu continued. They showed you footage of their children being murdered. They begged for assistance, and every single one of you found a reason to say no." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each ambassador. "Resources too valuable, not strategic enough, might set a bad precedent. You hid behind your laws and your procedures while an entire civilization burned." The ambassador tried to interrupt. "We have responsibilities to our own people." "Then you failed them," Menu said flatly. "Because one day the swarm or something like them will come for you, and when you cry for help, you will remember this moment. You will remember that you taught the galaxy that laws matter more than lives." "This is not." "We did not come here for your approval," Menu interrupted. "We did not ask for your permission. We saw people dying and we helped. That is all." "But the cost to your own people was ours to pay. 18,000 humans died protecting the. Each one volunteered. Each one knew the risks. They died for something bigger than themselves. Can any of you say the same?" The chamber was silent. "You want to sanction us," Menu continued. "Go ahead, limit our fleet, restrict our weapons, pass whatever laws make you feel better, but every species in this chamber now knows the truth." He paused, letting his words sink in. "When the monsters come, when you are dying in the dark, when you cry for help and the stars are silent," he looked directly at the camera, "Earth will answer, and we will bring everything we have. Laws be damned." The hologram vanished. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some demanded immediate action against humanity. Others sat quietly, thinking about Menu's words. A few, very few, felt something they had not felt in a long time. Shame. 6 months passed. Prime healed slowly. The scars remained, but new buildings rose from the ruins. Parks were replanted. Children returned to schools. Life continued. In the central plaza of the capital city, they erected a permanent monument. It stood 50 feet high, made of marble and steel. It showed a human soldier in powered armor, kneeling, cradling a child in his arms. The inscription was carved in both and English. "They came when no one else would. They bled when no one else could. They are those who answer the darkness." Beneath it the names, all 18,000 humans who died, each one remembered, each one honored. Ra visited the monument every day. She would stand there for hours, reading the names, remembering faces. The Marine who had taught her to shoot a rifle. The pilot who had crashed his fighter to save her city. The medic who had worked 40 hours straight to save children. On Earth, the returning fleet received a hero's welcome. Parades in every major city. Medals and honors. But the survivors did not feel like heroes. They felt tired. Admiral retired after the ceremony. She had served for 41 years. She had fought in 6 wars. Prime would be her last battle. General Menu stayed on for 2 more years, then he too retired. He spent his remaining days writing, recording the stories of those who died, making sure they were remembered. Sergeant and the other chimeras were returned to stasis, locked away again in their black ships, the weapons humanity swore to never use unless absolutely necessary. They went back into the dark without complaint. They had done their duty. But everyone knew they were there, waiting. The swarm never returned to Council space. They had calculated the cost of fighting humans and decided it was too high. There were easier prey elsewhere. And across the galaxy, a change began. Other species saw what humanity had done. They saw humans risk everything for strangers. They saw the price humans paid and the choice humans made. Some were inspired. They began questioning their own governments, demanding action, insisting that laws serve people, not the other way around. Others were afraid. They saw human violence and retreated into isolation, building stronger defenses, avoiding contact. But everyone, every species in every corner of known space, learned one thing. When you need help, really need it, when death is certain and hope is gone, there is one species that will answer. Humans. They are not the strongest species, not the most advanced. But they are the ones who come when called. They are the ones who stand between the innocent and the monsters. They are the ones who pay any cost to do what is right. A new phrase entered common usage across the galaxy. It started with the and spread to other species. When someone faced impossible odds, when they needed a miracle, when they had nowhere else to turn, they would whisper, "Pray the humans hear you." Because the stars may be silent when you cry for help. The great civilizations may hide behind their laws. The powerful may turn away. But Earth listens. And when Earth hears someone in need, Earth does not send diplomats. Earth does not send negotiations. Earth does not send thoughts and prayers. Earth sends soldiers. Earth sends warriors. Earth sends its fleets and its fighters and everything it has. The stars were silent when they cried for help. But Earth heard. And Earth sent beasts. Not because it was profitable. Not because it was strategic. Not because it was required by law or treaty. But because it was right. And sometimes, when the galaxy is dark and cold and cruel, that makes all the difference. Years later, a young student asked Ra about the monument in the plaza. Who were they? The child asked, looking at the carved names. Ra smiled, though her eyes were wet with tears. They were humanity, she said. They were warriors who crossed the stars to save people they never met. They died so we could live. Never forget them. Why did they come? Because we asked, because they were good, because that is what humans do. The child looked up at the statue, the human soldier and the child, protector and protected. I want to be like them, the child said. Then be brave, Ra said. Be kind. Stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves. That is what they taught us. That is their legacy. The child nodded seriously and touched the monument, as millions had before. In the dark of space, in corners unknown, other species watched and learned. Earth had shown them something new. That laws and treaties were not enough. That strength without compassion was worthless. That the measure of civilization was not in its weapons or its wealth, but in what it chose to do when faced with the suffering of others. Earth chose to help. Earth chose to fight. Earth chose to sacrifice. And the galaxy would never be the same.